done this in so long, it feels like. I have not sat and talked to the camera in ages. One, because I've been sick. I had like a month of just no voice. I had chest infection, laryngitis. So the voice was not voicing. There was nothing there. It sounded like a squeaky mouse. And then after my voice came back, it was holiday season. So I was busy with the girls. They were off school, and I host every year, even though I don't celebrate Christmas, but I host every year, because it's that one time of year where all your family can get together and your friends, and you can eat, you can drink, you be happy. So yeah, that just, there was no way I was going to be recording in those 2 weeks, because it was school holidays. I need to focus on my daughters, and because I had loads of other stuff going on. However, the new year has started. Welcome to 2026. The new year has started. I have not yet gone back to work. I'm due back to work this week. Hence why I'm back to work here. YouTube is my night, is my 5 to 9, right? So hence why I'm back here. Now, the next few videos, you're probably not going to see as much of an intro to them, because I'm batch recording. I'm not going to be doing them weekly. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time batch recording, just so that I can catch up to where I was. Also, because uni life is going to be getting heavy. I've got a paper due this week that I need to finish, and it's pretty much done. I just need to write the conclusion and the introduction. I've proofread it. I've sent it to my mum for proofreading, so I'm waiting for her feedback, and I will be submitting that hopefully by the end of today. And then I have supervision with my supervisors next week, so I'll get feedback on that. Am I happy with this paper? No, but I said that about the last paper that I wrote, and as I was thinking about it, I was kind of like, oh, is this actually the topic? I feel like I've gone so far off the topic, it's not even a joke. But anyways, I'll be back. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. And if it is your first time here, welcome to my channel. I am Lily, the academic mama, and I'm here to talk to you today about true crime. And here we talk about true crime with a little bit of a twist. So today we are going to talk about a man called Samuel Little, who the FBI have confirmed he is responsible for 93 homicides that happened between the 1970s and 2000s. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Samuel Little was actually born Samuel McDowell on June the 7th, 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia. And from the beginning, as many of these stories, his life was marked with instability. He was born to a mother who was very irresponsible. Her name was Bessie May Little, and she was reported to be a teenage lady of the night. And there is some belief that when Samuel Little was born, she was actually incarcerated, so he was born in prison. However, he was primarily raised by his grandmother. He wasn't raised by his mother, and she raised him in Ohio. And from the beginning, he did seem to demonstrate some behavioral issues. He had disciplinary issues and problems when he was in school. By his own admission, so Samuel himself has said that he developed violent sexual fantasies as a child, and his actual criminal activity started when he was a teenager. It started in his teens with theft, which led to him being put in juvenile detention facilities, and then over the years it just escalated into fraud, assault, armed robbery, and great. By 1975, he had been arrested already 25 times across 11 states and had served a total of 10 years in prison. And he had escaped 2 homicides at this point before his final conviction in 2014 where he was given a guilty verdict. So even though this started in 75, we know that he committed homicides in 75. He wasn't actually convicted of anything or investigated for anything until 1982. A 1982 Mississippi grand jury investigation for homicide was actually dismissed on the grounds of lack of evidence. Then in 1984, in Florida, he then was acquitted of a homicide of a woman called Patricia Ann Mounts. And this was because they claimed the witness testimony was unreliable. He served 2 terms in the California prison system for assault and false imprisonment. In other words, he kidnapped someone. And this was between 1985 and 1987. And then in 2012, he was incarcerated for being in possession of illegal substances. Now, Little generally targeted marginalized women. So, ladies of the night, substance users, and homeless women. And what his MO was, he used a method of asphyxiation so that he could avoid leaving any forensic evidence. One of the ones I read, he asphyxiated her and just left her at a river because water apparently gets rid of DNA. I don't know if that was his reason why or if it was just by circumstance that he did that. But his transient lifestyle and the societal invisibility of his victims allowed him to evade capture for he basically evaded capture until he confessed, right? In 2014, 2012. So if it wasn't for him, they probably would never have linked him to all of the homicides, the 93 homicides. Well, he's only linked to 50, but there are some still being investigated. Because of an arrest in 2012, DNA evidence finally linked him to 3 homicides that were committed in Los Angeles. And this is what led to his conviction of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. So after his arrest in 2012, he was arrested in Kentucky. His DNA was run through CODIS, and this is what connected him to the 1980s Los Angeles homicides. The FBI's VICAT also flagged his case, which prompted further investigation, and he initially denied the claims. He initially said, no, not guilty. Then in 2018, Texas Ranger James Holland, who was an expert in interviewing psychopaths. Now, if you have seen my psychopath versus sociopath video, that may make some sense to you. Go and watch that because there is a difference. The way psychopaths are and the way they present themselves, they will go to the grave without having to share any information. So this investigator, James Holland, was a specialist in this field. He was able to get into the mind of psychopaths, and he offered Little a prison transfer in exchange for confessions, basically. And they spent 700 hours interviewing. Well, there was over 700 hours of interviews, and Little confessed to 93 homicides across 19 states, and he provided precise details that were used to be able to corroborate these cold cases. He had somewhat of a photographic memory, so he was able to remember some of the most precise of details. In the Department of Justice SA Kit initiative, that confirmed 34 homicides by matching his DNA to the case files. And then local police reopened some unsolved cases by using Little's confessions, which led to new indictments. So he's already been convicted of 3 homicides. Now he's confessing to all of these other homicides. These new cases are being opened. DNA is being matched to unsolved cases. And he's being there are more indictments being placed on him. Now, with Little's not complete, but near photographic memory, this is what played a pivotal role in corroborating his confessions. Because he was able to recall specific details about victims, like their clothing, their physical traits, and some of the crime scene locations, this allowed the detectives to cross-reference the information. So they cross-reference cold cases, and then they were able to use this to verify timelines. Now, the wording used is artistic. I don't think he was very artistic, but and I'll put some of his pictures up in a sec, you'll understand what I mean. But his artistic talents also contributed, because he drew 30 sketches of some of the victims, which helped family members identify their loved ones. And because of some of these sketches, these cases were then reopened. Now, investigators used psychological tactics to get into the mind of Little. And what they did was they affirmed Little's self-image. They tried to make him feel, I don't know if this is good about himself, but they referred to him as a killer, not as a rapist. Don't know why there's a difference there. I know there's this kind of thing in prison that you're more likely to be harmed by other prisoners if they know you're a rapist. I don't know, but that's what they did. They didn't refer to him as a rapist, and this was to encourage his confessions. His vivid recollections and his willingness to share details bridged the gaps between what they knew and what they needed to find, and then it revived what were stalled cases, the cold cases that nobody was really looking at. Because he was able to give so much information, now there's a new breath of life into them, therefore they were able to get something out of it. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go through all of the cases because there are 93 he has recalled. I'm going to say a couple of the confessions that he gave. Now, the video confessions, you can watch them on I found them on the web. They're on YouTube, some of them, I think. But I'll link them in the bottom. So there was the unmatched, this first one is an unmatched confession. I haven't found this person yet. So it was North Little Rock, Arkansas, between 1992 and 1994. Little said that he encountered a black female in a transient area of Little Rock, and he remembered that it was cold and possibly snowing around the time that they met. He described her as being around the age of 24 years old, between 5'5" and 5'7" inches tall, and about 200 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilos. I'll put it somewhere on the screen. But he said that he stayed with her on and off for about 3 days, and then he reported shoplifting with her, and then they sold what they had stolen. He also remembered being arrested for shoplifting in North Little Rock Kroger grocery store, and records indicated that he was actually arrested in that place. The North Little Rock Police Department have on record that they had arrested him for shoplifting on April the 20th, 1994. So that would mean that the homicide happened in 94, not between 92 and 94. It would have probably meant it happened in 94. Now, according to Little, he was released about 3 hours after his arrest, and this was because they allowed him to go and move his vehicle, which was a 1978 yellow Cadillac. Now, there are two different stories. One is that it was a 1978 yellow Cadillac Eldorado, and the other one says it could have possibly been a yellow Dodge. I don't know, but he had to go move his car. Now, he stated that when he returned to his car, the woman that he had shoplifted with was sleeping inside the car. He first drove her to meet her ex-boyfriend, who was a man called Bear. He, at this point of this confession, he believed that Bear was deceased. And then he drove back to her home, or not her home, because she was a transit, so where she resided. And he returned the next day, driving with her towards Benton or Bentonville, Arkansas. When they were outside Little Rock, he drove down a dirt road and manually asphyxiated her. He unalived her. And then he stated that he placed the woman's body on a pile of branches and old, like, corn stalks in or near a cornfield. There wasn't confirmation as to whether she was actually in the cornfield or just next to it. And he believes that the woman's name may have been Ruth and that her mother lived in North Little Rock. So he couldn't remember her name. He could remember what she looked like, and he kind of remembered the location. However, that is still an unmatched case. They haven't found. There's not a cold case on her, basically. The next one is also an unmatched case, and this happened in Las Vegas, Nevada, in 1993. And at this time, he was driving his 1978 yellow Cadillac Eldorado, maybe the Dodge, to Los Angeles when he met a black woman on Owens Avenue or Jackson Street. He was between the two streets, and he described her as a thin, dark-skinned woman who was approximately 40 years of age, and she was about 5'5" tall, weighing between 110 and 120 pounds. He believed that she had naturally short hair, but she wore a long-haired wig. He remembered that the woman had pointed out her son, who was a black male, approximately between the ages of 19 and 23 years old, and he confessed to taking her to a motel where, again, he unalived her by asphyxiating her, and he then placed her body in the boot or the trunk of his car, drove to the outskirts of Las Vegas, where he pulled into a remote location and rolled her body down a steep slope. So he just kind of pushed her down a hill. Yeah. He then said he threw her clothes out further down the road, so not where he pushed her. He drove a bit further and threw her clothes away, and it was likely that her body was never found because of the location that was in. So hence the reason it's also an unmatched confession. In 1982, he confessed to a homicide of a woman that he met in New Orleans. This guy gets around. I don't think Las Vegas is very close to New Orleans, but anyways, he confessed to the homicide of another black female in New Orleans around autumn time, and he described her to be between 30 and 40 years old, between 5'8" and 5'9", and weighing about 160 pounds, with honey-coloured hair and brown skin. And he said that she had like medium length hair. He remembers that she was wearing a pretty dress. Watching some of these confessions, may I add, was quite chilling, because he doesn't say it with like any emotion. He's just telling a story. It's weird. But yeah, he remembers her wearing a pretty dress with buttons on the front, and he said that they met in a club where she was attending someone's birthday party. Little left the party with this woman, and the woman told him that she lived with her mother, who was sickly, possibly an invalid, unable to look after herself. And she gave Little the keys to her house. He must have been very charming to just give some random guy the keys to your house. But he then drove to the Littlewoods exit off the I-10, where he turned down a dirt road along a canal that was being dredged. They got out of the car. Little pulled the woman towards the canal, where he unalived her and left her body. He then said after this he went back to the motel where he was staying in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So some of these confessions, might I add, he was known to be someone who assaulted women and was a rapist, but he doesn't seem to really confess to the essays, which is potentially why the investigators referred to him more as a killer than as a rapist, because it's almost like he knew that SA was wrong, but he still committed the homicide. I don't know, but he doesn't seem to admit to the actual acts. He tells them that he committed the homicide, but he doesn't really kind of establish that he did anything else other than that, which I find was really weird. But let's think of the academic element. Now, the academic element today is quite short and quite small, quite concise. But I found something called the routine activity theory, and it kind of helps to explain how Samuel Little was able to commit so many crimes in the span of time that he did. And this framework states that crime occurs when a motivated offender encounters a suitable target in the absence of capable guardianship. So someone who is easily accessible with no one to kind of look out for them or protect them. Hence the type of demographic of women that he went for. Samuel Little's background and his psychological profile, because we established that he was a psychopath, the FBI have referred to him as a psychopath, made him a motivated offender. He specifically targeted vulnerable women whose lifestyle made them suitable targets, and the lack of social support and law enforcement attention for these specific victims created an environment where he could operate without being concerned or without worrying that he'd be found out. They were essentially invisible to society. They were transients, they were night work, they were ladies of the night, they were substance abuse users. So essentially, when these crimes were investigated, were they really investigated, or was it just, yeah, it's another one of those, let's just push it to the side? Many of the victims weren't even reported as missing in time for the police to be able to act. And because of Little's transient lifestyle, it allowed him to move very, very quickly before he would even be identified. So even if someone picked up that, oh yeah, I saw her with this guy, like the lady that was at the birthday party, people may have seen her leave with him, but because he moved around so quickly, there may not have been by the time he may have been identified, he's gone, right? Now, the absence of guardianship due to their substance dependence, their illegal work, and the general societal neglect meant that there were very few consequences for his actions until DNA confirmed that he was the criminal, he was the suspect, and that's what finally caught up to him. But I would argue potentially he could have just ended with the 3 homicides. He didn't need to confess to 93. However, he did. And I think that is also a bit of ego, because now he's known as the most prolific serial killer in US history. I thought that routine activity theory kind of fit this story. If you can think of a theory that you think fits, or a concept that fits this story in particular, please do let me know in the comments. I welcome your comments and I like to interact with your comments. So let me know where you think, or what framework you think might fit with the story of Samuel Little. Essentially, without Little's ability to recall all the information that he did at the age he was at as well, because he was in his 70s, most of his crimes would have remained unsolved. Now, they've solved 50. There are still 43 out there that need to be solved. But his memory essentially bridged the gaps between the jurisdictions, revived cold cases, and provided closure to families. The case highlights the vulnerability as well of marginalized populations and the challenges that are presented when it comes to solving cold cases because of the types of victims and the type of lifestyles that they live, and also because of the criminal and type of lifestyle he lived, because he also had a transient lifestyle. But it also demonstrates that forensic science has advanced so much that now you are able to link a case from the 1980s and 1990s to someone who gets convicted in 2018. And because of that, now you can finally bring to justice someone who deserves justice even after decades of going under the radar. And you would think the fact that the man had been arrested 25 times in such a short space of time, there must have been other things that he was doing. But hey, he's been convicted now. He's behind bars. I don't think I didn't, when I was doing the research, he was still alive. So, yeah, and that is the story of Samuel Little. Thank you for sitting with me today. It was lovely talking to you guys today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.